The humans didn't fire a single shot. They just stood up, walked out of the most powerful council in the galaxy, and left a note that said, "Good luck, dumbass." That was 48 hours ago. Now 12 star systems are on fire, 3 species remembered how to wage war, and I just watched a peacekeeping robot punch itself to death after reading human history. This isn't war. This is vengeance. But not ours. Humanity didn't start the fire, they just stopped holding the match. The Galactic Council had been in power for centuries, keeping the galaxy at peace through carefully crafted treaties, endless negotiations, and the heavy hand of control. They dictated who could have weapons, who could trade, and which species could evolve beyond their primitive state. But humanity didn't play their game. From the moment humans entered the galactic fold, they made it clear they weren't interested in submission. Commander Elias Grievin, Earth's representative to the Council, had spent years in diplomatic meetings, quietly observing, collecting data, and silently laughing at the Council's misguided belief that they could maintain peace by suppressing species and rewriting their history. Elias wasn't some wide-eyed idealist. He knew the Council was holding the galaxy together with strings of lies. What they called peace was nothing more than controlled chaos. Humanity, with its stubborn refusal to bow to such an artificial concept, had always stood on the edge of this great charade, ready to expose it when the time was right. That time came sooner than anyone expected. The decision wasn't made overnight. It had been building for years, a slow burn as the Council expanded its reach, wiping the memories of species that remembered their violent pasts, rewriting them into peaceful models of compliance. Humans never agreed to the protocols. They didn't need to. They weren't interested in being part of the Council's social engineering experiment. But they knew something the Council didn't. While the galaxy's most powerful species were busy pacifying the war-torn minds of their subjects, humanity had started collecting the truth. The history that the Council had carefully buried. The bloodied, messy past of every species that thought peace could be manufactured. Elias sat at the head of the human delegations table in the Council's Grand Hall, looking out over the representatives of hundreds of species, all too absorbed in their own politics to notice the subtle shift in the air. He could feel it, though, the tension, the weight of the decision that had already been made. Today would be the last day the humans sat at this table. He had long since grown tired of the charades. The endless talks that led nowhere. The promises made, broken, and buried under layers of bureaucracy. He could already hear the murmurs starting around the room as his delegation stood and began to file out of the chamber. The whispers, the nervous glances, and the outright confusion as the humans walked away from the Galactic Council without so much as a word of farewell. No explosions. No threats. Just a clean break. One by one, they left the chamber, their feet echoing on the cold marble floors, until Elias was the last one standing. He turned to face the Council, his face unreadable, but his eyes burning with quiet intensity. He dropped an encrypted data crystal onto the table. It slid across the surface and came to a stop in front of the Council's chair. The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating. "We're done here," Elias said, his voice carrying across the room, cutting through the heavy atmosphere. The Council members stared, blinking in confusion, disbelief. The highest-ranking members, the ones who had governed the galaxy's peace for centuries, had never encountered such a thing, an exit without a demand, without a blow. "You can't just walk away," said Wuntar, a telepathic alien whose species had dominated the Council for millennia. He leaned forward, his 3 eyes narrowing. "This isn't your decision to make." Elias didn't even flinch. "It's already made," he said, his voice calm but sharp. "The data crystal contains the files we've been collecting on you. Your memories, your lies, your so-called peace. It's all in there. You didn't keep the galaxy at peace. You kept it subjugated." He turned on his heel and walked out, not waiting for a response. His footsteps echoed in the silent chamber, but they were the only sound. When he left, he took the last shred of humanity's involvement with the Council with him. The data crystal was activated moments later. The Council's top officials, along with dozens of other species leaders, watched as the files were decrypted. They didn't know what to expect, but what they saw was a flood of memories, buried deep within the minds of hundreds of species. Memories of wars fought and won, ancient rituals of combat, blood feuds between civilizations that were now no more than forgotten ghosts in the Council's sanitized version of history. The files revealed secrets the Council had spent centuries hiding. The Helvex, a race known for their pacifist tendencies, had once ruled a savage empire. The Nkathi had been notorious for their brutal, berserker-like battle songs, songs the Council had erased from their history. Species that the Council had deemed violent had once thrived in a galaxy where their strength was their identity. Now they were nothing more than puppets in the Council's grand design, their minds stripped of the very essence that made them who they were. As the data flooded their minds, the leaders of the Council began to panic. The walls they had built to control the galaxy were crumbling. Species began to awaken from their enforced slumber, their memories returning, their violent histories flooding back like a tide they could no longer hold back. The first to react were the Krell. Once a proud warrior race, they were now reduced to diplomats and peacekeepers. But as their battle songs echoed in their minds, their instinct for war surged back. They stood in unison, their massive forms towering over the other species, their eyes glowing with the fury of forgotten battles. "What have you done?" one Tar demanded, but his voice shook. "You've unleashed chaos." Elias's words echoed in his mind, cutting through the rising panic. "We didn't start the war. We just stopped holding the match." The Council's attempt to control the situation failed spectacularly. One by one, species began to rise up. The Zarn, once peaceful scholars, remembered their brutal past as executioners. The Sahari, a race known for their intellectual prowess, remembered the days when their battles were fought with swords, not words. And the Council, in its panic, began to fall apart. Elias knew what was happening. The chaos, the confusion, the awakening, it was all part of the plan. Humanity had known what the Council was capable of, and they had bided their time. They hadn't wanted war. They had only wanted the truth to come to light, and now, it was out there for all to see. The humans had walked away, and with their departure, they had set the galaxy on a new path. A path where the truth would no longer be buried under layers of lies, where species would no longer be kept in the dark. The Council had thought it controlled everything, but it hadn't accounted for the one thing it could never control, the human desire for truth. As Elias watched from Earth's orbit, he allowed himself a rare smile. The galaxy was no longer under the Council's thumb. It was free. And now, the galaxy would have to decide how it wanted to move forward. Elias Greven stood on the balcony of the human embassy, his gaze sweeping over the endless sprawl of the Council's capital. The city was pristine, orderly, everything a picture of controlled peace. It was the perfect lie, one they had constructed over centuries. He had grown tired of it. He had grown tired of them. The constant negotiations, the hidden truths, the blatant manipulations. The Council, in its arrogance, believed they could control everything. They had mistaken humanity's silence for submission, and today, that mistake would be corrected. It started with the crystal. It was deceptively simple, a small, unassuming device, barely larger than a fist. But inside it lay the truth, encrypted and locked away for centuries, a record of all the lies the Council had buried. The history of the galaxy, stripped of the falsities the Council had imposed, was all inside. A history of violence, of war, of empires built and destroyed. Species that had been pacified, their memories altered or erased, reduced to nothing but shadows of their former selves. The human delegation, as always, sat in silence as the Council meeting began. Elias watched as representatives from every species filed into the chamber, their faces a mixture of self-importance and ignorance. None of them understood what was coming. They still thought humanity was just another obedient player in their galactic theater. One Tar, the head of the Council, took his seat at the center of the room. His eyes glowed faintly, his telepathic powers ever present, scanning the room for any signs of discontent. But Elias wasn't interested in hiding his thoughts. He wanted the Council to see the truth, to understand why this was happening. He placed the crystal on the table in front of him, the tiny device gleaming under the harsh lights. "We've made a decision," Elias said, his voice cutting through the usual murmur of conversation. He didn't need to raise his voice. The calmness in his tone was enough to make everyone stop and listen. "Humanity will no longer be a part of this farce." Wuntar frowned, his telepathic abilities probing the humans' minds for any hint of deception. Finding none, he raised a brow. "What do you mean by no longer a part?" he asked, his voice cold and sharp. "We're done," Elias said, leaning forward. "We've been playing your game long enough. The peace you've crafted is built on lies. You've rewritten history, erased memories, and manipulated entire species into believing that what you've created here is peace. It's not peace, Wuntar. It's control." The council's leaders shifted uncomfortably, their faces betraying their unease. Elias was right. They had known this moment was coming, but they had hoped, no, believed, they could avoid it. They thought humanity would conform, that they would accept the council's definition of peace. But humanity didn't bend that way. Elias didn't look at them as they panicked. He didn't need to. He knew what they were feeling. Fear. Real fear. The kind that comes when you realize that everything you've built, everything you've fought for, is about to collapse. "We're leaving," Elias said, standing up and placing a small, flashing data crystal in the center of the table. "All human embassies will be closed. All human vessels will withdraw. You'll never see another human face at your tables." The tension in the room was palpable. The other species glanced nervously at each other, wondering what this meant for them. The council had made it clear, humanity's departure wasn't just a loss of another member. It was a declaration of war. A war not of weapons but of truth. Wuntar slammed his fist on the table. "You can't leave! You are the peacekeepers of this galaxy. If you walk away, everything will fall apart." "We're not the peacekeepers," Elias replied calmly. "We never were. We were just the ones who let you believe it." The other council members began to murmur, their voices rising in confusion and fear. They tried to counter his argument, tried to make him see reason, but it was too late. The die had been cast. Elias had made sure of that. The human withdrawal wasn't just a gesture. It was the opening move in a war, one that wouldn't be fought with weapons or fleets. It would be fought with knowledge, with the very truths the council had worked so hard to bury. "Shut it down," Elias said, his voice a command now. "Every human ship, every station, every embassy, shut it down. Now." He turned and walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing through the chamber. He didn't need to say anything else. The message was clear. They were free. Humanity was free. And the galaxy was about to feel the full weight of that freedom. As Elias left the room, he knew the council wouldn't just let this go. They would fight back. They would try to suppress the truth, to suppress the rebellion that was already beginning to spread. But humanity wasn't like them. Humans didn't need to be controlled. They didn't need to be told what to believe. They had the power to change the galaxy, without ever firing a shot. The Council's decision to manipulate the galaxy, to rewrite its history, had backfired. Now, as humanity withdrew, the galaxy would remember. The galaxy would finally understand what had been hidden from them for centuries. As Elias stepped out of the chamber, he couldn't help but smile. The war had already begun, and it wasn't the one the Council had been preparing for. The galaxy was waking up. The truth was spreading. And humanity? Humanity had just set the galaxy on fire. The embassies closed, one by one, the messages sent. Earth had already begun its quiet retreat, its ships leaving the Council's space, disappearing into the blackness of the universe. And as the last human vessel slipped into the distance, the Council's greatest fear became a reality. The galaxy wasn't just waking up. It was remembering. And humanity had just given it the tools to remember everything. The fire was starting, and there was nothing the Council could do to stop it. Elias stood in the darkened chamber, his eyes fixed on the Council members. They had all gathered, their faces a mixture of disbelief and anger. Their holographic monitors flickered, displaying chaotic feeds from across the galaxy. The human embassies had closed. Ships were leaving the designated space. Earth had made its move. "You can't just do this," Wantar said, his voice shaky, his 3 eyes narrowing. "You can't walk away from the peace we created. Humanity needs us." Elias stared at the telepathic alien, his calm demeanor unwavering. "Needs you? Or do you need us? Because I've got news for you. This whole peace you speak of was never peace. It was control. A lie. And the moment you started making humans comply with your false narrative, you lost any claim to authority." "You're wrong," Wantar growled. "We kept the galaxy from collapsing into chaos. Without us, everything would devolve into war." Elias shook his head slowly, almost pityingly. "You didn't keep the peace, Wantar. You kept the lie." The room fell silent, but Elias could feel the pressure building in the air. The council was crumbling before his eyes, their carefully constructed image of order and control beginning to splinter into shards. He'd known this would happen. The moment humanity exposed the truth, it would tear everything apart. The artificial calm they'd created, the mental conditioning, it had worked for a time, but now, the galaxy was awakening. And humanity had just flipped the switch. "We are not leaving because we fear war," Elias continued, his voice measured, but carrying an undeniable edge. "We're leaving because you've been using your peace as a weapon. You've erased history, you've manipulated species, and you've lied to every living being in this galaxy. That ends today." Wantar's eyes flared, and the room seemed to crackle with psychic energy as he attempted to probe Elias's mind. But it was useless. Elias had shielded himself long ago. The humans had prepared for this moment, making sure that their departure would not just be a simple resignation, it would be an irreversible breach. And now the breach was complete. "You think you can expose us and just walk away? You think we'll allow this to happen?" Wantar snapped, his tone venomous. "You'll regret this. The galaxy will never forget what you've done." Elias leaned forward slightly, his gaze locking onto Wantar. "You're right about one thing, the galaxy won't forget. But not in the way you think." From his pocket, Elias pulled a small device. A data crystal, the key to everything. He placed it gently on the table, the soft thud of it hitting the cold surface loud enough to send a ripple through the room. "This," Elias said, "contains everything. All the secrets you've buried. All the memories you've erased. The truth will spread faster than you can control it. And when it does, the galaxy will remember who you really are." Wantar's expression faltered for a moment, the first sign of doubt creeping into his features. He leaned forward, his voice now desperate. "Do you really think the galaxy will follow you? You think they'll accept your lies over ours?" Elias's eyes were cold as he met the council leader's gaze. "I'm not asking them to follow me, Wantar. I'm giving them the choice. The truth is free, and I'm handing it to them. You can try to control it, but you won't succeed." The silence that followed was deafening. The council members were frozen, their eyes glued to the data crystal in the center of the table, as if they could will it to disappear, to undo what was happening. But it was already too late. The damage had been done. "What will you do now?" Wantar asked, his voice low and trembling with uncertainty. "If you walk away, if you expose everything, what happens then? Do you really think the galaxy will just accept your version of reality?" Elias didn't flinch. "They'll accept the truth," he said simply. "Because for the first time, they'll be able to see it. They won't be shackled by your manipulation anymore. They'll have the power to choose their own path. Some will fight, some will flee, but everyone will remember who started this. And that's something you'll never control." He turned his back on the table, facing the exit. His hand hovered over the door controls as he spoke the last words that would seal the fate of the council. "You never understood us, Wantar. We didn't need your peace. We just needed the truth. And now, you'll see what happens when you take that away from people." With that, he stepped out, his departure final. The heavy door slid shut behind him, leaving the council in stunned silence. No more words could be spoken, nothing would change the reality of what had just happened. Humanity was gone from the council, and with their exit came the unraveling of 1,000 lies. Elias didn't look back. He didn't need to. He could already feel the shift, the invisible tremors spreading through the galaxy. Humanity had done what it had set out to do. It had stripped the illusion of peace away, leaving nothing but the raw truth beneath. The galaxy would burn with the weight of it, and there was nothing the council could do to stop it. He had known this moment would come. The moment the truth was revealed, the entire structure of power the council had built would crumble. The galaxy's oldest lie was now exposed, and nothing could put it back together again. In that instant, Elias felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The burden of diplomacy, the endless games, the false smiles, it was all gone. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, humanity was free. And that was enough. As the ships retreated, as the embassies shut down, as the galaxy's power structures fractured, Elias knew one thing for certain: the council would never recover from this. Not because of a war, not because of a single battle, but because the truth, once unleashed, could never be contained again. And in the end, the truth was humanity's greatest weapon. Elias walked through the dimly lit corridors of the council hall, his steps deliberate and steady. The weight of what he was about to do felt heavy on his chest, but it wasn't fear. It was resolve. He had been preparing for this moment his entire life. Every decision, every alliance, every small act of resistance had been a part of this plan. And now, the galaxy was about to witness it. He arrived at the Grand Chamber, the very heart of the Council's power. The room was filled with representatives from all across the galaxy, the architects of peace, or at least that's what they believed. The delegates eyed him with suspicion as he stepped into the center of the room, his presence filling the space with a tension that was almost palpable. The council leader, Wuntar, stood at the head of the table. His expression was one of calm authority, but Elias could see the flicker of doubt behind his cold eyes. He knew what was coming. Elias stood before the table, and for a moment, the room was silent. Then Wuntar spoke. "You've made your point, Elias," he said, his voice measured but tinged with an edge of anger. "Humanity has walked away. But I don't understand why you're here now. What do you expect to accomplish?" Elias looked around the room at the other faces, aliens of all shapes and sizes, their expressions a mixture of confusion and resentment. They had thought humanity was just another cog in their machine, another obedient species following the rules. But now, they saw the truth for the first time. Humanity was something they had never anticipated. Free, independent, and willing to burn the entire structure down. "I'm not here to explain myself, Wuntar," Elias said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "I'm here to show you what happens when the truth gets out. You wanted to manipulate the galaxy, control us all under the guise of peace. But peace built on lies is no peace at all. And now, everyone is going to see that." He paused, letting the words sink in, watching the reactions play out across the faces of the council. He could see the fear creeping into their eyes. They were already starting to realize that this wasn't just about a withdrawal. This wasn't just about humans leaving the council. This was the beginning of something far bigger, something they couldn't control. Elias reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, unassuming data crystal. The crystal was nothing special to look at, but the moment it hit the table, the room seemed to hold its breath. He slid it across to Wuntar, who looked at it for a long moment before hesitantly taking it in his hand. "This," Elias said, "contains the truth. The truth about the council, about what you've done, about how you've manipulated the galaxy into submission. You've erased the memories of entire species, rewritten their histories. You've kept them pacified, neutered them of their strength and their will, and sold the lie of peace. I'm giving it back to them now." Wuntar's face darkened as he turned the crystal over in his hand, his telepathic powers reaching out, trying to read it, trying to understand it. But it was no use. It was locked. The truth couldn't be hidden anymore. "Do you think this will change anything?" Wuntar said, his voice tinged with frustration. "Do you think that by revealing the past, you will undo the peace we've built?" We have kept this galaxy from war for millennia. You're throwing that all away for what? To prove a point? Elias smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You're wrong, Wuntar. You didn't keep the galaxy from war. You kept it from remembering who it was. You erased the violence, the rage, the rebellion, everything that made species strong. And you called it peace. But the moment you started hiding the truth, you made a fatal mistake. Wuntar's grip tightened around the data crystal, and Elias could see the flicker of panic in his eyes. He knew what was coming. He could feel the shift in the air, the calm before the storm. This wasn't just about the human withdrawal. This was about exposing the very foundation of the Council's rule. This was about tearing it all down. You think you're saving the galaxy, Wuntar said, his voice rising now. But you're only creating chaos. You're turning species against each other. They won't understand what you've done. They won't accept it. I'm not here to make them understand, Elias replied, his voice cold and unwavering. I'm here to give them the choice. To let them decide for themselves. The truth is a weapon, Wuntar. And now, they're all going to see what's been hiding in the shadows. The data crystal hummed in Wuntar's hand, and suddenly, it erupted with light. Streams of data filled the room, cascading like a waterfall of information. It was more than just data. It was the flood of memories, of histories long forgotten. The hidden wars. The broken treaties. The species that had been rewritten, erased from existence. The rebellion of the Zarn, the rise and fall of the Krell, the massacres hidden under the banner of peace. The council members recoiled, their faces blanching as the data flooded their minds. They were trapped in the flood, unable to stop it, unable to hide from the truth they had worked so hard to bury. Elias stood motionless, his gaze locked on Wuntar. The alien leader's face had gone pale, his mind struggling to process the information that was now flooding through him. The truth was too much to bear, too overwhelming for someone who had spent centuries suppressing it. What have you done? Wuntar gasped, his voice shaking. I've given the galaxy back its soul, Elias replied. Now they'll remember who they are. And they'll decide how to move forward. Wuntar fell to his knees, his mind unraveling under the weight of the truth. The other council members were no better off. Some were shaking, others weeping, as the flood of forgotten memories consumed them. Elias turned his back to them, his heart pounding in his chest. The galaxy was no longer under the control of the council. The peace they had built was a lie. And now, it was crumbling before their eyes. As he walked out of the chamber, the doors closing behind him with a heavy thud, he felt a strange calm wash over him. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. But for the first time, it wasn't a war of weapons. It was a war of truth. And humanity had just delivered the first blow. The galaxy was waking up. And it would never be the same again. Elias stood alone in the empty hall, the door to the council's grand chamber closing behind him with a quiet hiss. He hadn't looked back. There was nothing left for him in that room, nothing left to say. He could feel the weight of the truth settling over him, the ripple effect of what had just happened, but there was no satisfaction in it. No sense of triumph. Just the heavy awareness that the galaxy was about to change, whether it was ready or not. He didn't need to wait for the fallout. He knew it was coming. Wuntar and the rest of the council would try to contain the truth, bury it again, lock it away behind layers of deceit and half-truths. But this time, it wouldn't work. Humanity had set the stage, and now the pieces were in motion. His communicator buzzed, a sharp reminder that the galaxy was never as quiet as it seemed. He answered, his voice grim. Elias, came the voice on the other end. It was sharp, urgent. You've done it. They've seen the data. Elias ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. I know. It's only a matter of time before they try to spin it. They'll call it a mistake, an accident, anything but the truth. And the species? The voice asked. Will they follow? He paused. The silence in the hall was deafening. I don't know. I'm not their leader. I'm just the one who set it free. Do you think it was worth it? Exposing everything? The chaos will be unimaginable. Elias laughed bitterly, the sound echoing in the empty room. That's what they don't get. They think they can control chaos. They think they can tame it, hold it in place. But chaos is freedom. The galaxy hasn't been free in centuries. They've forgotten what it's like to have a choice. Then what now? Elias stared at the door, knowing what was about to happen. Now the galaxy wakes up. They'll fight. Some will resist the truth, fight to hold on to the lies. But others? Others will rise. And maybe, just maybe, they'll build something better out of the ashes. He disconnected the call without waiting for a response, his hand shaking slightly as he dropped the communicator back into his pocket. He didn't need reassurance. He didn't need anyone to tell him he had done the right thing. He'd made the choice. Now he had to live with it. He walked out into the hall, heading toward the docking bay. His ship awaited him, silent and waiting, ready to take him away from the madness he had just unleashed. But even as he moved, he could feel the weight of what was to come pressing down on him. The universe was a strange place. There was no easy way to dismantle a system that had been in place for so long. The Council had been the ruling force of the galaxy for millennia. They had built a world of order, a world of peace, peace at the cost of truth, at the cost of freedom. They had controlled everything, manipulated the galaxy's history to their advantage. And now, with one single action, one single act of truth, that control was slipping away. Would they fight back? Of course they would. Would the galaxy burn in the process? Probably. But somewhere in the chaos, Elias knew there was hope. There had to be. He boarded his ship and sat in the pilot's seat, the familiar hum of the engine bringing him a small amount of comfort. He keyed in the coordinates, ready to leave, ready to escape. But as he looked out at the stars, his fingers hovering over the controls, he couldn't help but wonder, was he really leaving? Or was he just setting the stage for something far worse, something that could never be undone? He didn't have the answer. Not yet. But one thing was clear, the galaxy was on the brink of something new. And whatever that was, Elias knew it would be far more dangerous than the false peace the Council had tried to impose. The truth had been set free, and it was no longer in his hands. The ship took off, the quiet hiss of the engines cutting through the stillness of space. For the first time in a long time, Elias felt like he could breathe. The weight on his shoulders had lightened, but the future felt heavy. There was no going back, not now. The galaxy would never be the same again. But as the ship disappeared into the depths of space, Elias didn't regret what he had done. The truth was out there now, in the open, for everyone to see. And that, for better or worse, was the only thing that mattered. The Council had failed. And humanity had won.